Good morning.
Good morning.
How's everybody doing?
Good.
Everybody have a good Thanksgiving?
Yes.
Did everybody eat too much food and then kind of regret it afterwards?
Yes.
Thrilled to come to our rescue because we've called them.
What?
Alright. Cool. So we got a couple birthdays real quick, and I just want to take a moment and why are you shaking your head? No, you love this. Damien.
Yes.
This is your favorite thing.
Best
So I just want to
favorite.
recognize these birthdays real quick. If we can have Damien just stand up. You don't have to come up here, but just stand up real quick. And Damien today, 18 years old. I knew Damien since he was like a little baby, basically. Like 11 years old, so probably not a baby. Just house training though. As a little 6th grader in Impact. You can sit down if you want. You don't have to sit down or stand that long. As a little 6th grader, and it's pretty cool because now he's a senior, and I feel old for the first time. And so it's pretty cool. I also want to recognize one other birthday. If you want to go ahead and stand up also.
What?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, okay. How old are you turning today?
I'm over 300 now.
Over 300. I'm not going to explain that, actually. Let's just leave it at that. I feel like that's better. So yeah, I'm excited for the opportunity to be able to be part of this series, The Antidote for Anxiety. And I did quite a bit of research for this beforehand. And as I looked up stuff on worry, stress, anxiety, there's one word that continued to show up every single time that I looked those things up, that people would describe the feeling like this. And that word was overwhelmed. That they would feel this heaviness, that when we worry, when we have anxiety on our life, that we feel this weight that weighs us down while we are dealing with that. So I want to start off with an illustration real quick. I'm going to have Brandon come up here. And I always like to have an illustration. I always say I'm not sure exactly if it's going to add anything, but this one will definitely be fun for me to do. So we're going to have Brandon's up here. And this is for the illustration. Just I want you guys to understand that this is illustration Brandon. Okay, so the things I'm about to say about Brandon are not necessarily true, but this is illustration Brandon. So not real Brandon.
Okay.
You guys get it?
Yeah, we'll get
Never mind, I don't
it.
think they get it. Go ahead. So illustration Brandon. So and just to show how anxiety weighs on us. Okay. So Brandon is a senior in high school right now, right? And every single day he goes to school. You have some AP classes, right? And you have this weight of performing well, getting good grades, doing well in that. So I'm going to have you just go ahead and wear this on your back. It just says, am I good enough? So we'll just go ahead and put this on you. And he's going through his school day every single day with this. That's not too bad, is it? It's kind of like an overfilled backpack. I have frozen bottles of like 2 liters in there, so it's pretty heavy. But it's not too bad, right? Dog chew, that's not good clothes. But as he's going through school, all the people that he sees, he always has like this thought in the back of his mind: do they really like me? Do my friends really care about me? Like, I mean, we hang out now, but like, do they really like me? You're holding it like a baby, okay? He tries out for. You like theater, so you try out for a play. Am I gonna make the part? Am I gonna get the part that I want? And if I get the part and I stand up in front of everyone, am I gonna remember all of my lines? Is everybody gonna laugh at me when I'm done with this? And he has all this worry that goes on. So this one says, can I do this? How are you feeling right now?
I need 2 bags of salt.
Yeah, well, that's literally what you're doing, so that makes sense. Other things as he's going through the day, all these thoughts of what if this happens? What if? Sometimes poop happens, so that's kitty litter. So, what if? What will they think about me? Like, have you ever had that thought in your head? Like, what will they think about if I do this, or I wear this, or I say this, or I act this way? What if, right? So we'll put that on there. And then this one's pretty big one. What if I fail?
Oh.
Right, what if I fall short? What if I don't do well enough? So I'll throw this on here. And you're a pretty strong guy right now, right? So how are you feeling? You can't do anything, right? You kind of wheeled way down. No, but if I asked you to just continue to hold on to this, you could hold on to it for a little bit longer, right? If I asked you to go down and sit in your seat and hold on to that for the whole rest of the message, you could do that. You wouldn't like it, and I'm not saying you have to do that, but it would be hard, right? If I told you that to walk around carrying this all day, pretty stressful. You wouldn't be able to do very much with that. It's really weighing down on you, and I'm talking slow on purpose because I can see your face that you're not enjoying this. This is a little over 100 pounds that he's holding. But the sad reality of this is if I were to ask you to carry this around with you every single day of your life, that when you walk down the hallways of school, not only do you need to continue to hold on to every single one of these pieces without dropping it, but throughout the day, life is going to throw more weight on you. And I ask you to hold on to that, that would be pretty difficult. It'd be pretty crippling. You wouldn't be able to do very much of anything else because of that weight that is down on you, that overwhelming feeling. You go ahead and set that stuff down, and we'll clap for you. Cool. I actually was kind of concerned about doing this illustration. I know it's kind of weird to kind of worry about while I'm talking about worry, but I really wanted to make sure that we're not, poking fun at this, because there might be some people in this room who, if they're honest, this isn't a skit to them. That's their life. They feel like they're going through life each and every single day with all of that weight of anxiety, all of that worry that's there, and even the title for this, The Antidote for Anxiety, like that might even come across to some of you guys who are struggling with this as kind of the antidote for anxiety. Like I've tried lots of things. Like there's not a simple solution for this. Like you might have had people in your past come up to you and they just tell you like a simple fix. You're like, just don't worry about it, right? And you're like, oh, okay, thanks for that advice. That's kind of like if you're like vomiting and someone comes over to you and they're like, have you tried not throwing up? Right? Like that's not very helpful, right? Because that's not the problem, that's a symptom to the problem, much like how worry is a symptom to something else. So if I was going to be transparent and honest with you guys, I've never experienced like severe anxiety. But I have had anxiety serious enough to prevent me from doing something that I knew that I should. I worried about something to the point where I didn't do the thing that I knew I was supposed to do because I was worried that what if? And for me, it was the what if I fail. So the example I'm going to give you guys, the one that comes to mind right away, is when I was a junior in high school, 11th grade. There was a time that I gave into this anxiety, this worry. And it was a test, you guys may have heard of it, called the ACT. Pretty important test. And when I was growing up, they actually told us doing practice tests and stuff for this all the way back to like 4th grade. We're doing like practice tests. They were telling us how important that this test is for our future, and constantly telling us like that's the first thing that colleges look at is your ACT, and not only is it important for you to get that done, but it actually reflects the school. And so as I was getting older and I became a junior, I knew that I had to take this test. And the day of the test, I remember going into school and I felt physically sick. Like it made me physically sick thinking about this. And the crazy part is I didn't really care so much about the test. I thought the test was kind of dumb, to be honest. But that thought of, what if I really try at this? And I'm not good at tests, so I already kind of know I'm weak at this. But what if I try and I fail? I'm going to have this number next to my name, this score next to my name that shows my potential, that when colleges look at me, that's what I am. And that scared me, to be honest. I worried about that. So the day of the test went in, and I didn't take it with the general ed students. I took it in a different room. And I remember going in, and we had to fill out the packet and the Scantron. You had to put like your name and stuff on it. And the instructor told us to go ahead and start the test, and I just looked at it. And eventually I just put my head down. And then quite a while later, the instructor says, you only have this amount of time left. Go ahead and finish your test. I hadn't even started. I didn't even read one question. So what I did is I just started filling in bubbles. Just filling in bubbles. I really like those middle too. I just kind of went between those, right? And I didn't even break the seal on my ACT because of that fear of what if I try and I fail? What if I fall short on that? And for some reassuring reason, that me knowing that I just gave up and just didn't do it was a choice for me, because at least that was predictable. At least I knew on my terms that I was going to fail, not me trying and failing. I have a Bible verse. If you guys want to go to Luke 12.
Gold.
You guys there? When you get there, say, I got this.
I got this.
Nice. All right, 22. Go to 22. Sorry about that. 12:22. It says, I'm reading out of the ESV, and it says, and he, Jesus, said this to his disciples, therefore I tell you, do not be anxious about your life, what you will eat, nor about your body, what you will put on it. For isn't life more important than food, and your body more important than clothing? Consider the ravens. They neither sow nor reap, and or have neither storehouses nor a barn, and yet God feeds them. How much more valuable are you than these birds? And which of you, by anxious thoughts, can add a single hour to your lifespan? If you are not able to do as with such small things as that, why are you anxious about the bigger things or the rest? Consider the lilies, how they grow. They neither toil nor spin. Yet I tell you that even Solomon in all of his glory was not arranged like one of these. But if God so clothes the grass which is alive in the field today, and tomorrow is thrown into the oven, how much more will he clothe you, O you of little faith? And do not seek what you will eat and what you will drink, nor be worried. For all the nations of the world seek after these things. And your Father knows what you need. Instead, seek the kingdom, and these things will be added to you. Now, there's 3 points that really stood out to me when I read this. The first one was where Jesus said, and can all of this worrying add a single hour to your life? Can all of this worrying, does it benefit you in any way? And then when the answer is no, you can't do anything about it, he says, why do we worry about the bigger things? Why do we worry about the other things? The other part that stood out to me in this, in the New Living Translation, I like the way that it says this. It says, these are the thoughts, worrying what you'll eat, what you'll wear. These are the thoughts that dominate the thoughts of unbelievers. And when I read that, I was, ow. Those are the kind of thoughts that unbelievers have. But as Christians, we should have the same mindset, Philippians 2:5, as Christ Jesus. But when we're worrying, when we're focused on the things that surround us, like what will we do with this, what if, all these uncertain thoughts, we have the same mindset as the unbelievers in that. The last one that stuck out to me that we're going to talk about is the last part that I read. Seek first the kingdom of God. Seek God. We're going to go ahead and go through a couple other verses that are going to reinforce this. That one was Jesus himself saying that. This next one is kind of the main text of the series. It says this. It says, do not worry about anything. And it doesn't just end there, right? We didn't say like, hey, did you try not throwing up? Like, no, it doesn't just end there. Semicolon. Instead, pray about everything. Tell God what you need and thank him for all that he has done. Don't worry about anything. Instead, pray about everything. Second part, just like that. Tell God what you need and thank him for all that he has done. I know it's pretty simple, but we're going to kind of camp on this, is don't worry. Instead, that time that you'd be worrying, turn it into a prayer request, right? I love, this is the same verse actually, but it's in the Amplified version. I really like going to the Amplified because it's kind of like, you're almost like zooming in and all of a sudden like the verse got a lot bigger. Like it's the same verse that we just read, this one right here, but then when you go to the Amplified version, it like adds, really fills in all of these different ones. It's kind of almost like looking at it through a microscope. But it says this, it says, do not be anxious or worried about, again, anything, but in everything, every circumstance and situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, continue to make your specific request known to God. Philippians 4:6, Amplified translation. And I really love a couple of things. Every circumstance and every situation. And this letter right here was written by a dude named Paul. And what's really interesting is before he wrote this, like the 30 years prior to this guy had like every bad thing that you can think of happen to you. He's been beaten, he's been chased out of different towns, people tried to stone him to death, he's had like all these different things, and in fact, actually, as he writes these words, he's in prison. He's in prison as he writes these words. Don't be anxious or worried about anything, but in every circumstance, situation, with prayer. And not only is he just in prison, but actually, if you learn in the first chapter of Philippians, that he doesn't even really know what his fate is going to be with being in prison. He says in chapter 1, he says, they might execute me. But that's okay, because then I get to be with Jesus. And Paul really likes Jesus. Like, you're going to see that when you read through, like, he really likes Jesus. So he's okay with that outcome. It's uncertain, but he knows if he dies, he will be with Jesus. But then on the flip side, he says, if they don't execute me, then I get to keep doing this stuff. I get to help you. I get to keep witnessing and reaching the people who are in prison with me. I get to keep sending out letters and benefiting the church. That's good too. In fact, that's actually probably better for you if I live. Better for me if I die, because then I get to be with Jesus. Better for you if I live. You see how that's an uncertain outcome, but he has such confidence. He's not worried about it. He actually talks about that he's content in every situation. Paul's like, I've had a lot, I've had little, I've been shipwrecked, and he goes through this list, and he goes, whatever situation I'm in, it doesn't matter with my joy. When you read through Philippians, you see that this whole entire letter is just gushing with joy and thanksgiving. But when you look at the context, it seems like that would be the last thing he'd be talking about. But he's so joyful with thanksgiving. What's one of the dangers of worry? Well, I like Francis Chan said this. He says, worry implies that we don't quite trust that God is big enough, powerful enough, or loving enough to take care of what's happening in our lives. I'm going to read it one more time. Worry implies that we don't quite trust that God is big enough, powerful enough, or loving enough to take care of what's in our lives. I usually say it like this. When we worry, we're communicating to God that we don't fully trust him with what's going on. That worry that we see seems bigger than God. That worry is more powerful than God. When we worry about something, that's really what we're communicating to God. We're like, ooh, this is scary. This is big. I'm going to talk about Paul a little bit more. Is that okay? I like Paul. We're going to go actually to Acts. Oh, real quick. What book were we just reading out of a second ago? Philippians? Okay, kind of like, like how you normally stick a finger in the page, so you don't, just stick like in your brain real quick. Don't forget Philippians, okay? That's actually really important for this next part, because this next story we're going to talk about is out of Acts 16. Paul and Silas go to Philippi. I heard it laugh, so I'm like, someone already got it. Which is where this Philippians church is at, in Philippi. In Acts 16, you see Paul and Silas going and begin preaching the word to people. And as they're doing that, there's this fortune teller demon-possessed girl that's following them. And she keeps shouting stuff at Paul and Silas. And finally, Paul had enough, so he turns around and he's like, get out of her, in the name of Jesus, get out. And the demon flees. Well, because of that, she was no longer able to do fortune telling. So the little slave girl's owner got really mad because that's a really lucrative business, and now she lost the ability to do that. So he was so mad that what he did is he went and he beat up Paul and Silas and beat him up, drug him out, and actually without a trial, had him thrown into prison. And there they are in prison. They didn't do anything wrong. In fact, they actually did something good. They did something really helpful, something really good, but instead they're being treated kind of unfairly, right? Have you ever been there? Have you ever, did the right thing, but all of a sudden you're like, hey, this isn't what I feel like I should get for doing the right thing. I'm actually getting the short end of the stick. But in verse 25, I love this. It says, but about midnight, when Paul and Silas were praying and singing hymns, they're worshiping a praise to God, and the prisoners were listening to them. I'm going to read it again. Around midnight, when Paul and Silas were praying and singing hymns of praise to God, and the prisoners were listening to them. Right after that semicolon, it says, suddenly there was an earthquake. And the bondage, the jail that they're in, they're set free. They were able to walk away if they wanted. So what happened after that is the jailer actually, comes out and he sees that there's, a big old hole and everybody could get out. So he's like, oh no, he was actually going to take his own life because he was fearful that he was going to get in big trouble for this taking place. But before he did that, Paul stopped him and he says, no, we're still here. And the jailer said, what must I do to be saved? How do I get what you have? I mean, the jailer saw how these guys were acting in the worst kind of situation, in the worst of circumstances. They were praying, singing hymns, and the prisoners, other prisoners, were listening to this. So Paul shares with them what they must do to be saved. And actually, the jailer plus their whole family is saved because of this, right? Now, what I love about the story that's pretty crazy is, remember the letter that he's in Philippians? If you actually go back, I think it's 10 years or whatever, the church started from this encounter when Saul and Paul, Saul and Paul, I don't want to say Saul for some reason, Pastor Craig. That's not the right name, is it? Paul and Silas were able to do this. It started and launched a church. And not just any church, a thriving, actually one of the best churches in the New Testament. Not that it's a competition, but there's always good things being said about this church. And it started in the most unlikely circumstance. But notice how they reacted with prayer, worship, and sharing their faith. See, guys, even when we're in the difficult situations, even when we're in those worst ones, we need to remember that we trust in Him at all times. Pour your hearts to Him, for God is our refuge. For God is our refuge. Sometimes when we're so busy running away from the storms or the things that are scary that we forget that we have a loving God that's right there that we can go to, and He is our refuge. So again, I've said this a lot. Don't worry. Instead, pray. Don't worry. Instead, pray. Some people would be like, well, I'd be praying all the time, right? Because I worry, I have anxiety over a lot of stuff. That's cool. That's actually what Paul says here. He says, always be joyful, never stop praying, or never stop for prayer, is other translations. Be thankful in all circumstances, for this is God's will for you who belong to Christ Jesus. And that's kind of interesting, too, because this 1 Thessalonians, Paul is writing to, if you're in Acts, right after chapter 16, chapter 17 starts, and he actually goes to Thessalonica. Man, I practice saying this all day, and I still can't say it. Thessalonica? Yeah, whatever. Man, that's disappointing. I practiced all day, and I was like, I'm going to nail this, and you guys are going to be like, man, he said Thessalonica, really good. But yeah, this church, whatever. And it actually mirrors almost perfectly what it says in Philippians. Always be joyful, never stop praying, be thankful in all circumstances, for this is God's will for you who belong to Jesus. Now, when he went to this place and started preaching, it is actually really interesting because a lot of people, when Paul was teaching this, a lot of people believed and started following Jesus. But there was great persecution in this area. Not only from the Jews, but because he was speaking to the Gentiles as well. And they're claiming that Jesus is Lord was pretty offensive to the empire, saying that there's another Lord, that there's great, great persecution. And this is Paul writing the letter back, saying this. A couple chapters before, it actually talks about some of the church family dying, and it was most likely being martyred for faith. And yet, he tells them, always be joyful. Never stop praying. Be thankful in all circumstances. And that church, despite their persecution, was actually thriving and doing very well under that pressure. Again, or 1 Peter 5:7. Give all your worries and cares to God, for he cares about you. 1 Peter 5:7. I'm going to amp it up one more time. I like the Amplified. Casting all your cares, all your anxieties, all your worries, all your concerns, once and for all on him, for he cares about you with the deepest affection and watches over you very carefully. Throw all of your cares, anxieties, worries, concerns. And I love that because we actually see that in those circumstances, that's exactly how Paul and Silas reacted. We see when they're in chains, this is back in Acts when they're in prison for casting out that demon. It says they were praying, singing hymns of praise to God, and the prisoners were listening to them. And there's something really that stuck out to me, and I kept rereading this same passage over and over and over again. And something stuck out to me, and it was this, that we have the ability to do something pretty powerful, that we can turn our anxiety into prayer. We can turn our worry into worship, our struggle and trials into testimonies. See, guys, if we give up our anxiety and we bring that before God, we can trade it, or we can bring it before in prayer, and something really powerful happens. Because what is anxiety? It's draining, it's heavy, it's painful, it's all of these negative things. It's not only just worthless, it's counterproductive. It takes you the other way. But if you turn it into prayer, it turns something that was worthless and draining into literally the most powerful thing that we can do. We can speak directly to the King of Kings, God who created the whole universe, and we can speak directly to him. We can turn it into the most powerful thing that we can do. When we give up our worry and we seek to worship God, really what we're saying is at that point that, this situation might look scary. This financial situation, I don't know how I'm going to get over this, but my God's bigger, and he provides, and he loves me. And if we shift our focus off of those things and we set our eyes on Jesus and on God, then it's kind of like my dad can beat up all your guys' dads. I got the dad, what are you guys going to do about this? I mean, that's exactly what David did, right? When he went to go fight that giant Philistine. He goes, you might come at me, with javelin and spear. You might be a big guy, but I come at you with the living God. Amen. Not even close, right? Turn that worry into worship. Man, that might look scary on something, but nothing compared with him. Our struggles and trials can be testimonies. Our struggles and trials can be testimonies. Look at this. Paul and Silas in prison, right? What's happening? Everyone's watching. The prisoners were listening to them. They were seeing, just by the way that they were living their life under pressure, that there was something different about them. They didn't have the thoughts that dominated like the unbelievers. They were trusting in God, even though it didn't look like there was much area to do, right? It looked like a bad situation. They trust in God. They turned that into prayers and worship. And people noticed. They were salt and light right where they were at. So again, turn your anxiety into prayer, worry into worship, struggles and trials into testimonies. And what you can do by doing that is you can flip something, like I said, that was negative into a great positive. I love what it says in Genesis 50:20. It says this, as for you, you meant it for evil against me, but God meant it for good. In order to bring about the present outcome, that many people would be kept alive as they are today. Sometimes we go through trials, sometimes we go through difficult times, sometimes we might see something, we can either worry about it or we can worship the God who put us there. We can either let that anxiety weigh us down or we can turn it into a prayer request and bring it before God. So what I would like to do actually in closing is we have these cards that are in the back, and what I'm going to have is Scott pass them out. And what I would like to do, you can turn some music on and just take just a couple minutes. I want you to write down what are some of the things that maybe are constantly coming up that, man, I'm worried about this. Oh, I don't know how I'm going to overcome that. Can God even use me for this? Whatever those kinds of things are, begin to write those down. And what I would like us to do in a few moments after we have that is to just go to somebody else in the room and either have them pray over you or you pray over them, however you feel comfortable with that. But please don't walk out of the room. Please don't leave until we got to move. Don't carry that weight, that worry, that crushing, overwhelming feeling of anxiety. So go ahead, write those things down. And at the end, we're going to ask if you would turn those in so we can continue to pray for you. If it's something personal and you don't feel comfortable having other people see it, there's a confidential little bubble there. And if you check that in, we won't put it in their next prayer meeting. We'll just have them pray. So I'm going to pray over you guys real quick. Just take a couple moments. Write down what are those worries. What's that thing that is weighing you down? And go ahead, write those things out. Wield it. God, we thank you so much for today. We thank you so much for this opportunity that we have to be able to gather in this place. God, we thank you so much that when we speak and we ask, God, that you're listening and you're right there. God, that blows my mind. It's so crazy. The King of Kings, the Lord of Lords. God, you created the universe, and yet you want to hear from me personally. You want to hear from each and every single one of us. And all of us have different things that are weighing us down, God. Sometimes it's so easy to look at the difficult situation that it is to keep our eyes on you. But God, I pray right now that we can push aside all those things and set our focus on you. God, that we can say we can do all things through Christ who gives us strength. That was written also in a time that was difficult. God, I pray that we're able to say that despite our circumstances. We love you so much. We're so thankful.